Well, good morning, everyone. Today and tomorrow, we celebrate the oldest holiday known to humanity. Long before Christmas, long before Hanukkah, long before any of the modern holidays, human beings celebrated the winter solstice. The winter and the summer solstice have been celebrated for unknown periods of time. Archaeologists have found remnants of stone henges and wood henges and various settings that have been used to celebrate the winter and the summer solstice. The winter solstice was particularly important because it represented the time, that point in time, that day in the year when the days began to grow longer. The sun began to regain its strength. The ancients, who were very dependent upon the sun, as we are today, but they were much more aware of it, being an agrarian society, dependent on the climate, the weather. And so the sun represented, or the solstice rather, represented the time when the sun, after dying for 6 months, was being reborn. So the solstice, to me, is a celebration of the light returning from the darkness. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the light returning from the darkness. Not in an astronomical sense or geologic sense, but in an inner sense, in the sense of our spiritual practice. So I want to talk about the inner meaning of the solstice, the birth of the light within the dark. In mystical language, darkness typically represents the unknown. Now, a lot of times I hear people talking today about the darkness, the dark night of the soul, and the dark this and that, as if it was a period of suffering and a period of intense emotions. And that could be true, but not necessarily. Darkness simply represents that which we don't know, the unknown, the unseen, that which is unconscious. Conversely, light typically represents awareness, that which we know. So the birth of the light within the dark is the birth of a new knowing, of a new awareness. And this particular pattern of knowing and unknowing, of the birth of the light and the death of the light and the rebirth of the light, is a pattern that is woven throughout all of the mystical traditions in the world, in one form or another. And one particularly fascinating study of the journey of mysticism in terms of light and dark was undertaken about 125 years ago in a book that was written by the name of Mysticism. The author is Evelyn Underhill. It's not an easy read, it's about yay thick, but it's a beautiful and a powerful study of the journey from the Christian perspective. She studied the Christian mystics extensively, and she saw this particular pattern emerge. She saw 5 stages to the spiritual journey. And these were woven throughout the lives of many, many of the Christian and ancient mystics. And typically the first one is that of awakening. And we're all aware of that stage. The awakening for you may have been gradual or sudden. It may have been a very positive experience, or it may at first have been what they call the cosmic 2x4. But the awakening ultimately brings a new understanding, a new consciousness. It's the awakening of the light of understanding. And this typically is the first step on the path. The second step, almost universally, is that of purgation, as she calls it. Purgation meaning a period of cleansing, purification, letting go, testing. The Buddha was tested after his awakening, tested by Mara, the demon of illusion. Jesus was tested by Satan, the great adversary of the Lord. And so after the awakening comes what Evelyn Underhill called the dark night or actually it was St. John of the Cross coined the term the dark night of the senses. The dark night of the senses is when we let go of our attachments to the senses, to the body, to the world. And this is a period of unknown. It's a time that may seem to be very confusing and may feel very challenging to the point that we resist this experience. Pardon me. So awakening and then purgation, and eventually comes a new light. The new light of awareness, which Underhill calls illumination. And illumination is that period of typically ecstatic experiences. Sometimes psychic powers are bestowed upon the individual, or I should say awakened within the individual. So it's a time of great joy and illumination and awakening. And yet it can be a dangerous time too, because one can get lost in the spiritual entertainment of these high experiences, the joyful experiences. In Japanese Zen, they have a similar stage that's gone through. And in Zen, they call this Makyo. Japanese Zen is Makyo, which literally means the devil's abode, which seems like a strange name to give to illumination. But what it means in Zen is that it's very tempting to get lost in this place because it's so delicious. You can get attached to the experiences, almost like a drug high. It feels so good. And for many mystics, what Underhill calls the minor mystics, this is the end of the journey. And for most of us, it doesn't seem like a bad place to finish up. But for many mystics, what she called the major mystics, there's yet 2 more stages. And the next stage is called the dark night of the soul, the name given by St. John of the Cross. The dark night of the soul is letting go of all attachment to any experience, whatever. No matter how illuminating it may be, no matter how glorious it may feel, no matter how spiritual, quote unquote, it may be. So this is a period in Christian language, it feels like God has abandoned us. You know, God introduced me to this marvelous new reality, and then bam, all came crashing down. So the dark night of the soul, again, is not necessarily a place of intense suffering, but it's a period, sometimes a long period, of not knowing, feeling like you're, quote, in the dark, like you're stumbling along without any roadmap or any directions. And of course, that's not the end of the journey. The fifth stage, the final stage in Underhill's schema, is called union. Union meaning, in Christian mysticism, union with the divine. And this is where we not only experience the divine, we become one with the divine. So we live in the world as the divine. Permanently. It's not simply an experience, it's the way we live. And I kind of summarize it this way. There's three primary stages of the journey. Practicing with awareness toward God, practicing in the awareness of being with God, and then practicing being in the awareness of being God. So it's searching, knowing, and being. And each of these stages is punctuated by a period of purgation and deep darkness. Now, this is a generalized schema. Obviously, in the real world, in human life, things don't go that neatly and cleanly. But that's a general practice, a general roadmap, if you will, of the spiritual journey. Periods of light, periods of dark. So that's really the main point that I want to make, is that the journey, whatever the journey looks like for you, there will be times of awakening and feelings of great joy and illumination, and there inevitably will be periods of time when it seems like it's all dark and all is lost. In the Eastern traditions, they have different maps, if you will, and it varies a whole lot from one tradition to the other, and some have no maps at all and just focus on being present in the moment. But I think one of the most beautiful depictions of the experience of the relationship between the light and the dark is given in the Taoist symbol of the Tai Chi. Tai Chi meaning the great ultimate. This is not Tai Chi, the form, the practice. This is Tai Chi meaning the greatest, the wholeness. And so, Eric, if you could put up, if you haven't already, put up the symbol of the Tai Chi. Typically in our culture, we call it the YinYang symbol, but it's technically called the Tai Chi. But in this Yin-Yang Tai Chi symbol, we see an interplay of dark and light. We see what appears to be like a dynamic relationship, a dance, if you will, between the two. There's not a battle of light and dark. See, in the West, we tend to see the Zoroastrian vision of forces of light versus forces of darkness fighting one another. And so we internalize that, and we see darkness and light as being quite the opposite. We try to get rid of the dark and hold on to the light. But the Taoists, for eons of time, have seen that light and dark are really part of a greater wholeness in that dynamism. And also, if you see the dots, the white dot in the dark and the dark dot in the white, we see that within the one are the seeds of the other. Within the darkness is the seed of the light. And within the light is the seed of the darkness. And so As we reach this zenith of darkness, the seed of light begins to grow. The seed of awareness begins to grow and to blossom. So darkness is really a time when we let go of an old reality and haven't yet awakened to the new one. So it can be helpful anytime that you feel like you're in a period of darkness, of not knowing, of being lost, being confused. If you can just relax and accept the darkness, not as a permanent reality, but as a process, as a symbol of letting go of an old reality, of an old understanding. And as we do that, why inevitably then the birth of a new understanding, a new reality, a new awareness will awaken. And this can happen throughout our life in big ways, and it happens in our spiritual journey in little ways. Day by day, month by month, year by year, we experience this pattern. So I invite you to let the solstice, which is my favorite holiday, by the way, the solstice, technically this year, I think it is at 4 a.m. tomorrow, so it's not that far away from us. Let that be a symbol of a time when we release the old understanding and open up to the new. So I'd like to close with one of my favorite poems by one of my favorite poets. David White is a living poet. He's still actively creating. And this particular poem he wrote several years ago. It's called Sweet Darkness. When your vision is gone, no part of the world can find you. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. It's time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. The dark will be your home tonight. The night will give you an horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. You must learn one thing. This world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your own aloneness to learn that anyone or anything that does not bring you alive is too small for you. And so let's just sit for a moment. Allow the Dharma to penetrate our deepest being, to awaken us from within. Thank you for sharing your Dharma practice with us.